With the NFL draft now complete, it's time to dive into my final top 25 Superflex rookie rankings and tiers. And don't worry, I will show my one quarterback rankings at the very end, but essentially just follow the order of the skill players in this video, drop the quarterbacks down like 6 to 15 picks or so, depending on who they are. And that is my one quarterback rankings. But to kick things off in this Superflex rookie rankings, nice and simple, tier 1 is comprised of 2 players, Caleb Williams at 1.01 and Marvin Harrison at 1.02. I mean, do I even need to explain this at all? I mean, we know who these two are. We know how good they're probably going to be in the NFL and for fantasy. If you have either one of these picks, congratulations on getting an absolutely phenomenal prospect in this year's class. Now, tier 2 is also pretty simple because it's just one player for me, and that is Jayden Daniels getting drafted by the Washington Commanders. From a pure fantasy football standpoint, Daniels is the clear-cut QB2 in this class, and the draft separated him to be in a tier of his own because of the landing spots for Drake Maye, Malik Nabers, and everybody else behind him. I think there's actually a stronger argument that Daniels should be the 1.02 over Marvin Harrison than being the 1.04 behind anybody else. That's how much farther above he is than everybody else behind him, in my opinion. Moving over to tier 3, this is basically everybody else in the original top 8 that we had prior to the NFL draft. At the very top of the list, we get Malik Nabers, who I still believe found a great landing spot with the New York Giants. Was it the most ideal? Definitely not, but he's going to easily see 130 to 140 targets as a rookie, probably clear 1,000 yards or get very well close to it, and his hype train is just going to be in full force for 2025 if the Giants do get a new quarterback, so he is my current 1.04 in Superflex leagues. Then we get Drake Maye and JJ McCarthy up next, and honestly, I've gone back and forth so many times already on which one deserves to be the QB3 in this class. To me, this is like peak talent versus situation argument. I think Drake Maye is clearly the more talented quarterback, and the NFL will also believe that as well too with their draft capital difference, but the situation is just not great in New England, even though they added 2 solid receivers later in the draft in Jalen Polk and Javon Baker. I really actually like that opportunity for both guys in this new look Patriots offense, and I do think that they helped Drake Maye than what they had whenever they first drafted him. But for Maye specifically, it is not even a guarantee that he's the day 1 starter this year for New England, and I just don't see a super clear path to QB1 territory for fantasy over the next couple of years. So it's not really the most exciting pick with the 1.05, but sheer talent and draft capital is what is putting him up here. Now, JJ McCarthy, on the other hand, superb landing spot, of course, with the Minnesota Vikings. The weapons that he has are like the complete opposite of what Drake Maye has in New England. Now, I don't think that JJ McCarthy is an elite talent at the position, but when all you got to do is just throw the ball in the vicinity of Justin Jefferson and he's going to do all the rest, it's not going to be all that difficult for him to pass for 4,000 yards, 25 plus touchdowns, which would make him a borderline QB1 in fantasy. So I think as I'm saying this, I'm convincing myself to just put JJ McCarthy at QB3 and Drake Maye at QB4, but both of them are still sitting at 1.05 and 1.06 in Superflex leagues. And then to just round out this tier, it's Odunze and Brock Bowers. Again, maybe not the most ideal or exciting of landing spots, but there's just way too much talent here to have them any lower, especially with the draft capital and level of investment that they both got from the NFL. Odunze is a top 10 NFL draft pick, and while year 1 might be rough, Keenan Allen is a free agent at the end of the year, and DJ Moore is going to be 28 years old, so he's already applying for an AARP card by our standards, meaning the future of the Bears organization is going to be Caleb Williams and Odunze, so you have to invest in Odunze still as the wide receiver 3 at 1.07. And then for Brock Bowers, I think he's immediately the second option behind Davante Adams in this Vegas offense because he's just that good. I'm not expecting a Sam Laporta or even a Kyle Pitts level rookie season, but 600 to 700 yards, a handful of touchdowns. I mean, that right there is a top 10 season for any tight end, and I don't think that's all that difficult for Bowers to do in Vegas. And if he does have a better season with more yards, more touchdowns, maybe more of both, then we're looking at the easy Dynasty tight end 1 this time next year. Now, tier 4 is going to take us to the end of the first round, and it starts off with my wide receiver 4, Brian Thomas Jr., who got first round draft capital with an amazing landing spot of the Jacksonville Jaguars, where he has an immediate role as the the ex-receiver and the hopeful Calvin Ridley replacement in this offense. I wouldn't at all be surprised if BTJ actually had the second best rookie season of this entire class behind Marvin Harrison Jr. I think this situation is that good for BTJ and also really good for Trevor Lawrence and the Jags offense as a whole. It's just the rising tides raise all ships situation. Then at the 110, we get our first running back of the class, my RB1 Jonathon Brooks. Another great landing spot, even if it's not the most ideal. Brooks is going to win that RB1 job quickly in the Carolina Panthers offense, if not immediately over Chuba Hubbard. And Dave Canales running backs have been killer for fantasy recently, with Kenneth Walker 2 years ago, Rachaad White last year, which I expect to happen again for Jonathon Brooks. I can definitely kind of see a slower start to the year as he's still recovering from the ACL injury. So if you aren't able to snag Brooks in your rookie drafts, there might be a small buy window opportunity in September. But as we get more into the season, Brooks' talent level is just going to start winning out. And then we're just going to be full steam ahead for 2025. At 111 is my wide receiver 5, Xavier Worthy, another first round pick to another great landing spot with the Kansas City Chiefs. I still do have some fears that he's more of a one-trick pony in the NFL, but if there is any offense that can try to develop him to not be that, it's Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. And should Worthy develop into a much more diverse route runner, he is an excellent fit with Patrick Mahomes and pairing him with Rashee Rice and Travis Kelce. So I have to have him here as my wide receiver 5 in the late first round. And then to close out this tier and the first round altogether, we have my RB2 Trey Benson, who did fall to early round 3, but I love the Cardinals landing spot for the future of Trey Benson's career. We have seen James Conner be an absolute workhorse for 3 years in a row now in Arizona, and the assumption is that Benson is going to fall right into that workload starting in 2025, if not even pushing for more and more work with James Conner still there in 2024. Not to mention the sheer upside in what is hopefully an up-and-coming offense with Kyler Murray, Marvin Harrison Jr., and Trey McBride. Benson could be an absolute steal at the end of first rounds by this time next year. Getting into the second round now, tier 5 is again just one player, and that is my QB5 Bo Nix, who does get first round draft capital and 12th overall pick to the Denver Broncos. And listen, I'm not really a Bo Nix fan. I think this was a pretty sizable reach for Denver, as I have Nix as more of a day 2 quarterback. But when you look at everything that he has going for him with the top 12 investment, they then pair him back with his old college buddy Troy Franklin in round 4. You already have Cortland Sutton, you have Marvin Mims, Greg Dulcich, Javonte Williams out of the backfield. It's actually not a bad place for a rookie quarterback to be, and he's going to have a solid opportunity to show if he's the starter or not, with probably at least 2 to 3 years of a leash to prove that he is. Worst case scenario, you draft him at 2.01 and you sell him for around that same pick next year, or maybe like a 2027 first round pick a year from now. Something like that if somebody believes in him more than you do. But best case scenario, maybe Nix is actually kind of good and can kind of just be like a Baker Mayfield, Jared Goff kind of quarterback for your roster. Even Russell Wilson on the Broncos last year, who was actually a top 15 fantasy quarterback overall and in points per game. So I think it's worth taking a flyer on Bo Nix because the floor is actually pretty similar to where you're drafting him now, but the upside is still relatively there to gain something either ROI positive from value or by actual production. All right, now tier 6 is one giant tier of wide receivers, 7 players to be exact, that were all taken either late round 1 to mid round 2, plus I had to sneak in a day 3 guy in here. You guys probably know who it is, but in order, it goes Xavier Legette, Keon Coleman, Ladd McConkey, Adonai Mitchell, Troy Franklin, Jalen Polk, and Ricky Pearsall. Again, this is all one giant tier, so if you prefer one guy over somebody else on that list, I'm not really going to fight you on it, but this is the order that I would draft these guys in, and let me explain why. Legette at the top is just a continuation of what I had before the NFL draft. Legette was ahead of all but 2 of these guys pre-draft, got better draft capital than basically all of them, and is in a solid spot to potentially succeed without having to be the immediate wide receiver 1 and take some time to continue developing. And if he develops and actually hits as the wide receiver 1 for Bryce Young, his ceiling is tremendous, and I think the highest of this entire tier, so that's why I have him at the top of the tier. Then we get to Keon Coleman and Ladd McConkey, and I broke all this down a little bit more in my video that dropped on Saturday, reacting to both of their picks, but the TLDR on this is Coleman's upside is just higher. Better offense, better passing volume, better quarterback, greater skill set for wide receiver 1 upside. It is all there for Coleman in Buffalo. I do like Ladd McConkey in LA. I think he's a very safe pick if you're just looking for solid production, but I don't think the elite production is ever going to be there for McConkey. He might clip 1,000 yards once or twice, but Michael Gallup has done that. Darnell Mooney's done that. Terry McLaurin was over 1,000 yards last year and finished as the wide receiver 32 in fantasy. I think the floor is a lot lower than what people want to admit for Ladd McConkey because there is just no production profile from college, and he also needs to stay healthy, something that he's been struggling to do in the past couple of years. I just don't want everybody to completely lose their minds just because he's there with Justin Herbert. That didn't work for Mecole Hardman. It didn't work for Kadarius Toney. It didn't even work for Quentin Johnston in this offense with Justin Herbert last year. You still have to be a good wide receiver to produce in the NFL, and the jury is still out for me on if Ladd McConkey is a good wide receiver. Adonai Mitchell is up next. I really like the landing spot in Indy as the X wide receiver. I think he fits really well with Anthony Richardson and across from Michael Pittman. I did not like the slide that he took as the 11th receiver off the board, but maybe this is just George Pickens all over again, who also coincidentally was drafted 52nd overall in his draft, so Mitchell still remains a top 10 receiver in the early to mid-second round of rookie drafts. Then we get to Troy Franklin. I had to put him in here because even though he fell to day 3 for reasons that are still unknown to me, he gets drafted by the Broncos to pair him back with Bo Nix, and this is just so beautiful from any angle that you look at it. I honestly believe that Franklin is the best receiver on the Broncos right now ahead of Courtland Sutton, and Nix might also believe that because they already have a connection. I understand that there's risk here that maybe comes with a day 3 wide receiver, and maybe I'm banking too much on my evaluation of Troy Franklin before the draft, plus recent success stories at wide receiver like Amon-Ra St. Brown, Puka Nacua, Stephon Diggs was a 5th round pick as well too. But to me, this is the line where I'm willing to take that risk by betting on his talent still being there than those behind him despite being taken much later in the NFL draft. Then to close out the tier, it's Jalen Polk and Ricky Pearsall, 2 players separated by 6 overall picks in the draft as top 40 NFL wide receivers. I'm going to give the edge to Jalen Polk just because of the situation. Had the Niners actually traded away Debo or Brandon Ayuk, this would be an entirely different conversation, but Pearsall coming in as the wide receiver 3 really dampens any potential production he could have had in 2024, and that's just not really a question that I have with Jalen Polk in New England. Obviously, there are major differences in offensive firepower and success between the two teams, but if Polk turns out into being Jaden Reed, or remember that 7-week stretch of Elijah Moore in 2021, if Polk does that, then his value is going to go up, whereas Pearsall might be like the Clyde Edwards-Helaire of receivers in this year's class, and we just chalk it up to being a bad pick made out of luxury. All right, tier 7 now is going to take us to the end of my top 25 to close out the second round and get into this third round. At 21 overall, I have Malachi Corley landing with the New York Jets. I actually really like this spot from all sides. I think it's a great fit for Corley as he fills a more slot role immediately on the team, but could develop into more or be used in a lot of different ways and formations to just be like an offensive weapon. I can really actually see Corley becoming someone that Aaron Rodgers trusts, especially when Garrett Wilson is getting double covered downfield, basically just like his brand new Randall Cobb. I do have him a tier below the other receivers we just talked about because his draft capital was lower than theirs, and the immediate situation is just not as ideal if Corley is the wide receiver 3 in New York, or maybe even the 4, depending on Breece Hall's potential usage. At 22 and 23 overall, we get Roman Wilson and Jermaine Burton, a pair of new AFC North wide receivers, both landing in good situations for their skill sets as well. Wilson has an immediate opportunity to be the Steelers wide receiver 2 with George Pickens and fill the void left by Deontay Johnson. I wasn't really the biggest Roman Wilson fan before the draft, but the Steelers always seem to know how to draft and develop these day 2 wide receivers, so I am placing my trust here in them and the opportunity as well. Burton is kind of in the same deal. I do believe the talent is there, but coming in as the wide receiver 3 behind Jamar Chase and T. Higgins for this year might be kind of rough for 2024, but for 2025 and beyond, he could be an integral part of their offense, and catching passes from Joe Burrow is never a bad thing. I do have both of them behind Malachi Corley just because I was higher on Corley than both of them before the NFL draft, so I'm just being consistent here and keeping Corley ahead after the NFL draft. Now, 24 overall, my 212 in Superflex is my draft crush, Ray Davis, who found his way into a fantastic landing spot with the Buffalo Bills, who for 2 years now have been trying to find that perfect 1B complement with James Cook, and I think they got it here with Ray Davis. Last year, the Bills gave a combined 145 carries to Latavius Murray, Ty Johnson, Damian Harris, and Leonard Fournette in that complementary role to James Cook, and none of them were really all that good with it. But Davis is a very talented and experienced player coming out of college with true 3-down ability as a runner and receiver. I think he fits the hard-nosed role the Bills want with James Cook, but should James Cook get hurt, Davis could have some huge weeks as the team's RB1 with a full bell cow workload during those weeks. So I absolutely love this pairing here for my 2024 draft crust, and I'm going to try to leave every single rookie draft I have with Ray Davis on my roster. And then to wrap things up in this tier, in my overall top 25, we have my tight end 2 in the class, Ben Sinnott out of Kansas State, who is the only tight end drafted in the second round this year and one of only 2 tight ends drafted on day 2. Sinnott actually found an excellent opportunity to be a team's tight end 1 on the Washington Commanders with a decent target share to make him relevant every single week. I will also add though that Jatavian Sanders is my 26th ranked rookie right after Ben Sinnott, as I think both tight ends present good value as potential tight end 1s in fantasy that you're going to want to roster and be able to stream weekly if you don't have that elite guy. Think Dallas Goedert, Cole Kmet, Pat Freiermuth kind of players. That, I think, is what Ben Sinnott and Jatavian Sanders can become as a more median outcome to their careers, with potential for more as like a Mark Andrews or David Njoku type of guy with more volume. So that wraps up my overall top 26, technically, for 2024 Superflex rookie rankings. After that, we get into all the handcuff running backs like Blake Corum, Marshawn Lloyd, Braylon Allen, Will Shipley, etc., plus other day 3 receivers to make up my 3rd and 4th round of rookie drafts. And I did promise to show my one quarterback rankings at the end of this video, so here they are now on screen, basically following the same order for skill position players with just the top 4 quarterbacks sprinkled in throughout these rankings. And if you are curious as to my complete top 50 overall rookie rankings, they are available on dynastyleaguefootball.com, and you can use the promo code DLFvideo to receive 20% off an annual subscription when you sign up. So go check that out, guys, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Later.